Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you.
How are you this morning, Dr. Paul?
Doing quite well, thank you. And looks like we have a subject on dealing with foreign policy.
Yep, that is correct.
You're an expert on that,
Oh, no.
for sure. There's just too much of it. Wish we didn't have so much to discuss all the time. Or
exactly.
warn people. Sometimes I wish the people knew more about foreign policy, because when everything is quiet, things get stirred up and set the stage for something else. And that's what we're going to talk about here. There's a move on. The Pentagon evidently made the announcement that they're putting troops into Saudi Arabia. People say, well, aren't we already there? Yeah, we are already there, and we're their buddies, and we help them in Yemen, and we have all kinds of deals with them. But no, we don't have troops in Saudi Arabia, essentially. And yet we did. Mm-hmm. And I think as a preliminary to talking about troops going back in, whether it's a good idea or a bad idea, we ought to look for a minute at, what went on after 9/11. Wolfowitz was in the State Department, would be
Pentagon,
in the Pentagon, and he was very much involved, but he was the most outspoken, harsh guy in the administration, and the war was going on and getting ready for the Iraq War, and we've had the tragedy of 9/11, and he thought the real enemy was Iran. So we had some reassessment, and his reassessment is what we want to talk about. There were several good articles in 2003 when he finally had an interview, and he revealed what his real sentiments were. He admitted that it was a mistake having our troops there. He says it was an incitement to al-Qaeda. It was a recruiting tool for Osama bin Laden. It was a contributing factor to 9/11. And he was so hawkish on the war, but it was his position that literally prompted Bush then to at least take the troops out of Saudi Arabia, because they could see the harm, but they couldn't see the big picture. The big picture is that type of activity generally is harmful. It costs money, people die, leads to more wars. But this at least led to the fact that there was no reason for us to just stay there. So they brought the troops home, and that sort of died down, even though the war started. But one of the reasons they were involved over there was to perpetuate, and Wolfowitz admitted it, to perpetuate the lie that Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, which everybody knows now the war was based on lies. But here we are, Daniel. We're going back in. We're having troops, sending airplanes in there, sending missiles in there, and only for one purpose. The Iranians are coming. And we've showed the map so often. With the Iranians are surrounded by our bases and British and submarines, and they can hardly move. And now they're concerned that they're being at least engaged with the virus now, the coronavirus, and they're not about to be an aggressive force and march out. But anyway, we have to deal with it. Now Trump has been more sympathetic to war with Iran and tough position there than ever. But when I was thinking about this, what they're going to do, and they have to do this, the Iranians are bad people, and and they hate the Saudis. So in a way, we're serving the interests of Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
And that means, I wonder if Trump has worked out a good deal, because he always says, they don't pay their fair share. And the United Nations and NATO, nobody pays their fair share. So now he has this deal. We're going in to protect Saudis against Iran, because we're not protecting ourselves. I mean, we're not going to be attacked. So I'm just wondering whether Trump is going to collect any money from the Saudis. Of course, I doubt if we get paid for subsidizing their warmongering against Yemen.
Yeah, and how is it respecting and honoring the troops to use them as mercenaries? Hey, Saudis, cough up some money. Hey, you want some money? Yeah. I mean, it's insane. But, this caught our attention because we've talked about this before on the show. after 17 years, our troops are going back to the Prince Sultan base. That's where they were. That's where they were serving. That's what bin Laden said one of the reasons for the attack was. That, in addition to that, was our bombing of the Iraqi children and our relationship with Israel over the Palestinians. So he was very clear about it, and this was a problem. And as you point out, Secretary Wolfowitz said afterward that, yeah, they were a big recruiting tool for al-Qaeda. So we had to get out of there. And now they're going back in. So the question that I had when I looked at it, so this is no longer the case? They're no longer a recruiting tool? Did the extremists put out a memo saying, hey, no, we don't have a problem with it anymore. Go ahead and go back in there. What has changed to where you had something that was a precipitating factor of a huge attack on the United States, and now 2 years later, it's completely fine? What's changed? There's no explanation.
And I think, and I even talked about this a while back, and that is that when you put troops in like this and they can't deal with it directly and immediately, they resort to a terrorist approach because they can isolate or find American troops isolated someplace. And I think that the whole issue of terrorism hitting us here, the seeds have been sown because people don't like to have foreign troops in their land.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to even be motivated by strong religious beliefs. It's just the fact that, and this is certainly true in Afghanistan. Yeah. I mean, the tribal people there, they just want to be left alone and live their life the way they want. But we're vulnerable now. People like in Afghanistan, they didn't even seek to come here and do us harm, but they certainly have fought for their homeland, and yet we're still there, 19 years, and it doesn't look like we're going to leave. And this just seems that it's a follow-up of the policy. So once again, it's a contradiction. You know, with the executive branch, with the president right now, is saying one thing: we have to come home now. And here we're putting more troops in a hot spot, and it's really, you know, then you'd say, well, do the Iranians have a moral right to maybe react in certain way? They have to be alert to it. Why are these missiles over there? And they admit this is to confront Iran. So it endangers the world. It costs a lot of money, and it does nothing for the security or the prosperity of the American people.
That's true, and we have to wonder, we have to ask ourselves, what's the real game here? Because they say this is to deter Iran. Well, Iran is not going to attack Saudi Arabia. I don't think anyone would even suggest it. Only if you believe the lies that the Yemeni, the Houthi attacks on Saudis, in response, of course, to Saudi aggression against the Houthis, that retaliation, if you believe the lie that that's Iran, that's the only way that you can justify that idea. But are they there to, and we have it even in our title, to deter or really to provoke Iran? And I think that certainly is the intent. And what's interesting is, you know, they're putting in F-15s, F-22s, and Patriot missiles. They're loaded for bear. But that's not the kind of attacks that Saudis are facing. They're facing drone swarms, small rocket fire, homemade things. They're loaded for state missiles coming over, for the Iran missiles coming over, and that's not the case. So what is the point? Well, these Patriot missiles, they cost a few $1 million each. So somebody is making out, Raytheon is making out pretty well from this whole deal, too.
Oh, profiteering wouldn't be involved here. We're Smedley Butler when we need them to point this out. But of course, this has been going on for a long time. It's hard to believe that it will persist and they don't learn anything. We were talking about that, but you know, you'd think even if the wildest hawk in the world, practically over-speaking a bit, turns and says, you know, us having troops in Saudi Arabia was stupid. And it contributed to 9/11 and contributes to the recruiting of al-Qaeda. So what do? We go back and we do it again.
Let's do it again.
Well, we've taken a rest. 17 years. What the heck? We need to try it again. Yeah. Maybe they have forgotten. They have forgotten about it. So we're going to go back and see what we can do. So it's a shame. I think it's important we do our best to point it out. I don't think we're going to get a call from any leadership in the administration saying, saying, "Hey, you guys have a pretty good
ideas.
idea. We want to pick your brain about how this would evolve. Wouldn't that mean that they would be marching on Washington? Oh, maybe."
Well, I think the reason why we're talking about this being a provocation is because I think the U.S. has been trying to provoke Iran into doing something to justify an attack. The neocons have in the administration. I think Trump, he does go along with it, unfortunately, and maybe he's too foolish to see through it. But, you know, Scott Ritter, a friend of ours, spoke at our conference. He has a great piece in the American Conservative magazine, which I think perfectly captures exactly what the game is with the neocons vis-a-vis Iran. And he's talking about the events that led up to the U.S. assassination of Soleimani. And what he points out, and he does a very good job of it, is that the whole thing was based on lies from John Bolton. He created all the lies. You know, the K-1 base that was attacked on December 27th, which was this precipitating event that led to the assassination. The Iraqis had been warning the Americans for months. The area around that K-1 base is conservative Sunnis. It's not Shia militias, which we claim. It's basically ISIS sympathizers. The Iraqi government warned the U.S. over and over that there's going to be an attack, including just before the 27th. They'd been warning for a month that ISIS was planning an attack. Listen to this, Dr. Paul, and Scott points this out. There was a warning on December 27th. They're going to attack. ISIS is going to attack. Please, the U.S., keep your radar system on so we can get an early warning. The U.S. shut down that radar for maintenance that very day of the attack. And that makes you feel a little bit suspicious about what's going on. And the last thing that Ritter points out is that there were meetings between the National Security Council and the Pentagon about designating the Revolutionary Guards as a terrorist group. And the Pentagon was pushing back really hard because they said, this is dangerous. They're going to do it to us and call us terrorists. We don't want to go there. This is a state entity. John Bolton falsified the memos of those meetings. The Pentagon kept complaining and kept complaining. These memos were falsified to make it look like the Pentagon agreed with this designation. So this is the real danger we're facing.
Yes, and like you say, sorting that out, and you think they're going to do one thing, but they're lying, and then they turn on you for some reason. But I think getting these troops into Saudi Arabia, although there's troops all over the Middle East, there could be like some radical Islamists in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
Everybody in Saudi Arabia doesn't represent the militant position of their leaders. So this means that what about some type of a false flag or something that they blame it on the Iranians? That's what they did in Yemen.
Yep.
So they could do that, and there may be more vulnerabilities. Just the more troops we have scattered all over the place, the more vulnerable we are, and capture the headlines. And boy, it doesn't take long. It seems like you can read good statistics. The American people, they don't like war. They want to bring troops home, but all you have to do is have a bad incident and some Americans get killed and blame it on Iran. I mean, they're ready to go to war again. I mean, they don't want to be more comprehensive in thinking what has led to it. So that's our job, helping them to understand.
That's right. You know, when I sat down in your office, we were going to kind of put the show together this morning. You said one sentence that captured everything that I had spent all these notes doing. You just simply said, they're not there to protect America, and that's it. The U.S. troops are not going to Saudi Arabia to protect America. So if you're a president who ran and won on the idea of putting America first, how do you justify putting our troops in harm's way to defend the rich Saudis? And that's the big question. So that's a question, Mr. Trump. Please answer it. I want to talk just for a second again, and I've done it quite a bit, but I want to put up our picture again for our conference in May. It's going to be a great conference, Dr. Paul, about the war on speech. It's heating up on campuses. There is violence. And we're going to have some announcement of speakers. It's on May 23rd of this year in Houston, ronpaulinstitute.org/conference. Dr. Paul, you're going to be there. We're going to drag you up to Houston. Adam Dick, who worked for you and did civil liberties and free speech for you in the congressional office, is going to give a talk. I might have a couple of words to say. But I also will announce that we're going to have one of our one of our guests. We're going to have a couple of other speakers. But Jeff Deist, the president of the Mises Institute, who worked with us in Dr. Paul's congressional office and now runs the Mises Institute, he's going to come out from Alabama. He's written a lot about this. They do at Mises University. They deal a lot with young people and with the issue of speech. He's going to come out. He's got a really good talk. We talked about what he's going to say. So you're not going to want to miss it. Get those tickets. We've sold about a third of our tickets available so far. So I'm feeling good about it being sold out. But I don't want you to feel bad and miss out. So get those tickets today. Go online, and there's a link in our description for it.
Very good, Daniel. And I want to just talk a little bit about, this expression and free speech. And the Constitution is very clear. The First Amendment is very clear on protecting speech and allowing individuals to criticize their own government. That, to me, is the most important thing. The First Amendment has been written and clear. When I gave my last talk on the House floor when I left Congress, it listed quite a few little things here and there, that we should be worried about and dealing with spending and fiscal policy. But I said the number one issue of importance in order to try to be able to mold a change in our society and in our government is, keeping the First Amendment alive and well. Because if we have protection of the First Amendment and people can go out and freely express themselves and give the information and let the people sort out the truth from fiction, because I think truth always wins out in the end. That the First Amendment is pretty darn critical. The others are important too. Property rights are important. Certainly the Second Amendment is important. But all of them depend on the ability for individuals that are dissenting against the policies of the government to go out and talk about it. But now we hear people going to prison. We hear whistleblowers getting arrested and tortured. And whistleblowers are very vulnerable by just telling the truth of what our government is doing. So the First Amendment, I think it should be pretty darn high on the list of the necessities if we want to bring about peaceful revolution and change the system of government we have. One from an authoritarian government telling us what to do every step of the way and allowing us to make our own decision, lead our own life, and also spend our own money like we want, and not be victimized by a foreign policy that is very, very expensive and very, very dangerous. Americans lose their liberties and they have to pay the money to do it. So I am a strong believer in the First Amendment. I hope you can come to our convention, our meeting here in Houston soon. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.